Hello, friends. I'm Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness, and welcome to our Science of Stretching Hamstring Freedom sequence. What I think you'll need to be safe and to get the most out of your practice today are 2 yoga blocks, strap. If you don't have a yoga strap, you could use a belt. You could probably use a towel, but I would prefer for today if you got something where you could make a closed loop. A mat. I think a blanket isn't strictly necessary, but it can be a nice cushion between yourself and the earth. A bolster. If you don't have a bolster, rather than using like cushion, like pillows, a couch cushion can be a really nice surrogate for a yoga bolster. Gives you lots of resistance. It can be really helpful. And a chair. So press pause on your recording, roll out your mat, gather up your props, and when you're ready, press play and I'll meet you on your mat. So let's start in a comfortable seated position. Find a seat that you can sustain for a few minutes. So for me, that means elevating the hips so my pelvis continues to rock forward. And then set up for really great posture. So stack your joints, float your head over your shoulders, over your hips. And then on your next inhale, press down into your seat, grow out of your heart, in the crown of your head for the stars. And at the top of the breath, maintain this length along your spinal column. And as you exhale, if you can, let all your soft tissues fold down toward the earth. Good. Now, just a normal, natural breath for now. But we're going to shift into like for this training methodology, this flexibility training, the science of stretching methodology, there are really 3 principles. So we're going to start with the first principle right away. And this is, it's called a 4-8 breath. And we may have done this in one of our meetings before. But what it'll look like is I'll ask you to inhale through your nose for a count of 4, exhale through your mouth for a count of 8, making a ha sound. Now that ha, it might be audible, or you might choose to do it silently. Either way is okay. And I'll explain why we're doing this breath when we get later into the practice. So exhale out all your breath. And then inhale through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through your mouth, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And that's the breath pattern. So you can continue that at your own pace. Now, one of the things about this breath that I've noticed in my practice and for other people is we tend to lose the breath and let it go when we need it most. So I'll be cueing you to come back to the breath over and over again. And we're going to start to warm up the body with some moon squats. So before we do the first squat, let me show you some options. If you come into a standing position and then take your feet hip distance apart, turn your toes to the outside about 10 to 12 degrees, and then you can cross the forearms in front of you. Sit down. Option 1 is you can sit onto a chair. You can squat down onto a chair, right? And developmentally, this is really solid. This is rock solid, right? So that's one option. Another option, I think I can use this couch, but you could use a wall as well. You could sit down into a squat with your back supported by a wall or a sturdy piece of furniture, right? So that's an option. Another option is if you've got, like, I wouldn't want to do this with a plastic or a metal water bottle, but eventually if you get a yoga block, you can sit down into a squat with your seat supported on the block. What I'm going to choose today, what's going to work for me, is to elevate my heels. So I would like your heels resting on either the ground or some kind of support. But with my heels supported by this bolster, I could sit down into a fairly healthy natural squat. Or of course, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate this, but if you could just sit down into a squat with no support, that's great too. So first, let's come up to a standing position. Reach your arms up over your head. Turn your palms to the outside. Lift your gaze. Now, I prefer you not crank in the back of the neck, but lift your gaze slightly and find a slight action of drawing your shoulder blades together. Maybe visualize trying to hold a volleyball in between your shoulder blades. So not squeezing them tightly together, but a light action of engaging the rhomboids and drawing the shoulder blades together. And then as you exhale, cross your forearms in front of you, sit down into a squat. And 3 times during these moon salutations, we're going to stay here for longer and camp out. So this will be one of those. Fold your fingertips down toward the earth. Relax your forehead. Let your forehead drape down toward the earth. Right, and notice there'll be a certain amount of muscular engagement that'll be required for you to maintain the squatting position. So for me, the tendency is the weight wants to shift into my seat and draw me backwards. So I've got to continue applying some muscular engagement to keep the weight a little bit in the balls of my feet. But other than that, see if you can release everything else. The second, other than the 4-8 breath, that's principle one. The second principle of this training methodology is called wet noodle. This is, I'll talk more about this later, but this is based on research that shows that muscles stretch best when they're relaxed. So anywhere where you don't need muscular engagement, particularly in the target area where we're trying to stretch, see if you can release that. All right, we're going to start to move through a few reps of these moon salutations. So in your next inhale, start pressing into your feet. Lift yourself up. Reach your arms up over your head. Lift your gaze, draw your shoulder blades together again like you were gripping a beach ball. Exhale, cross your forearms in front of you. Sit down into a squat, release your forehead to your forearms. Inhale, press into your feet, rise up. Exhale, sit into a squat. Inhale, press into your feet and rise. Exhale, sit down into a squat and we'll hold again. So once again, release your fingertips down toward the earth, release your forehead down to the earth. And those 4-8 breaths will be hard to do when we're moving through the moon salutations. But once we sit into the squat, kind of 2 things, I think. One, this is where we really need that breath more. And it's fairly easy to maintain that 4-8 breath here. So as we move into the practice, what we're looking for, if you visualize a scale of sensation from 0 to 10, where at 0 you felt nothing and 10 would be excruciating, you'd be compelled to move, you would have to do something to change it. We're looking for a level in general that's about a 7. All right, so we're going to start to move again. On an inhale, press down into your feet, come up to standing, turn your palms out, draw your shoulder blades together, lift your gaze, open your heart. Exhale, squat, cross the forearms, release your forehead down, drop your seat down to the earth. Inhale, rise. Exhale, squat. Inhale, rise. Exhale, squat, and this time we'll squat and hold. So go wet noodle again. So one of the reasons we use this breath is down regulating the autonomic nervous system. On that continuum of sensation, when we get up above the level 6, we start to get into the pain threshold. And so for most people, depending on their relationship with pain, that puts us into a sympathetic nervous system response, fight or flight, right? So one, it's miserable. And two, the muscles can't really stretch because they're not relaxed. So we use that breath in order to maintain those higher levels of sensation. So we can make a we can really affect our range of motion and mobility pretty deeply. Sometimes even in a single session, people can notice a difference. Right, start to press down into your feet, lift yourself up. In the first true pose of our science of stretching practice today is going to be a ragdoll or a forward fold. Let me show you some options. I'd like you to have 2 blocks in a chair available. So feet hip distance apart, look down at your feet. I like the sides of your feet to make the shape of a number 11. And then start to hinge your hips back. Bend your knees enough that your whole belly will rest on the thighs. Now, one option is to take your stool or your chair and rest your forearms or your hands on that stool or your chair. Shift the weight into the balls of your feet and relax your neck. So remember, wet noodle. So this is one option. Second option is hands on blocks. And this is probably, some version of this is probably what I'm going to maintain for myself in this shape this morning. Right? Blocks could be at any height. Or you could lose the blocks and either let just gravity drape your fingers down toward the earth. You might grab opposite elbows and sway. But again, weight primarily in the feet, so loaded in the feet. So like a 70 to 30% ratio, with 70% of the weight in your feet, 30% in the heels. Relax your neck. And come back to that 4-8 breath. So, and just as a reminder, that level of sensation we're looking for, there's not particularly an advantage in this pose to go beyond that level of 7. So one of the things that I found, there are a few poses in this practice, not today so much, but for some of the poses in this practice, we were asked to push up to an 8 or a 9. But as a general rule of thumb, what I find, if I let myself go from a 7 to an 8 or a 9, it doesn't make a huge difference in my range of motion for that particular practice. Like, it doesn't affect that much bigger of a change in flexibility, but it makes me not ever want to do this practice again. So the level is 7, and look for that 4-8 breath. So one thing that people sometimes observe after the science of stretching practice is it makes them a bit sleepy, right? And that is almost certainly, that is the breath, that 4-8 breath, because it's down regulating the autonomic nervous system. It tends to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system response, or rest and digest nervous system response. So in addition to allowing our muscles to relax and us to find some comfort in a fairly uncomfortable shape, it also can put people into a really relaxed state. So the science of stretching practice is a great stretch to do. You know, it's early in the day for us. It's a great stretch to do in the evening as well. And the other thing about that breath is, when the breath is in your toolkit, with or without the stretching, 10 minutes of that breath at bedtime can really set the stage for a restful night of sleep for lots of people. So the muscle fibers, when we reach close to our maximum range of motion, wherever we're at in a given day, when we start to stretch beyond that, the nervous system tends to tense up, right? And the body's trying to protect us from potential injury. So it's a really helpful instinct. And when we're using a sound methodology, it can really prevent us from making increases in our flexibility and range of motion. So the other thing that this breath does is it communicates a message to the body that, hey, we are safe right now. This is going to be okay for us. We're going to start to come out of this pose, come into a reset pose. So maybe hands down to the mat. Step your legs back. Find a quadruped position like a child crawling first, and then a high push-up position. So take a look at your hands. I'd like your hands shoulder width apart, index fingers at 12 o'clock. And then you can do this two ways. You can do this on the knees or tuck your toes. Press your heels toward the back edge of your mat. Draw your belly button towards your spine. I'd like the core engaged. Puff the space between your shoulder blades up toward the stars. And notice here, there's a really human tendency to let the forehead collapse down toward the earth. I'd like you to counter that. Make the back of your head buoyant. So we're going to do this a couple times. This is just a reset. Tap your knees down to your mat. Take your knees out, mat width apart. Bring your big toes together to touch. Press the shoelace parts of your feet down into the earth. Just pulse into a happy baby or child's pose once, twice, three times, and then come back up into a high push-up position. Four, eight breath. Come back to that 4-8 breath. So if one principle of this methodology is the 4-8 down regulating breath, and the second is wet noodle, the third is time under passive tension. And this is based on research that has shown that if we want to increase flexibility, we need to meet or exceed hold times for stretches, which really means using a timer. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. Tap your knees down to the earth, nice and wide. Pulse down into your child's pose for 1, 2, 3, and then lift up, come into a seated position. I'd like you to have whatever you're using for a cushion and 2 blocks available. And we're going to do a wide-legged side stretch. So take your legs out, make a V shape with your legs. And your legs might be straight. Mine are going to have a really organic bend in the knees. Place left hand in between your legs on the floor, right hand by your right hip. Traction your torso over that right thigh, and then start walking your hands forward over that right leg. Now, I'd love for you to have some support for your forehead. So my teacher, Lucas Rockwood, he calls this blockhead. But you can stack blocks up under the forehead. Now, for many bodies, especially if somebody's flexing and bending in the hamstrings or lower back, 1 or 2 blocks on the floor might be fine. Or even without blocks, the forehead might easily and naturally come down to the thigh. That is not my experience in my body. I'm going to stack blocks up on my right thigh. 4-8 breath. Wet noodle. I've for years had a morning and evening stretching routine. And I thought I was keeping good time, but I just would keep it in my head. I'd be stretching while I was watching TV in the morning and the evening. And then I got a stopwatch, right? And I buy these 2 for $6 through Amazon. So it's not a big investment. It's really not. And what I found when I started using the stopwatch, that after a couple times of trying it with the stopwatch, I was like, my stretching routine seems to be taking a lot longer. So I started using the stopwatch in tandem with me counting. And what I found is I was wildly inaccurate with my counting. Right. So what the research shows is with the meet or beat hold times for stretching, that's up to 5 minutes. And what the research seemed to indicate, what the data indicate, are that beyond 5 minutes, it doesn't really seem to make any kind of meaningful difference in flexibility. So in my practice, I might hold a stretch for up to 5 minutes, but I'm not going to hold it beyond 5 minutes because it's not the best use of my time and my energy. It's less impactful on my mobility. Start to lift yourself up from the shape. Bring yourself back to center for a moment. And then right hand in between your legs, left hand by your left hip. Turn your torso so it's kind of poised over that left thigh. And then walk, walk, walk your hands forward. So we do have a pose in this practice that's not good for everybody. So I'm going to cue it briefly, but with my history of herniated discs in my lumbar spine, it's just not a smart pose for me. So I'm going to choose an alternate. So that's one of the nice things about this practice is we have lots and lots of options for every shape to fit the needs of lots and lots of different bodies. So there's this expression in our society about accepting limitations, and sort of the cultural wisdom seems to indicate that accepting limitations is a wise practice. And I don't fully disagree. I don't fully disagree, but I tend to think that sometimes we accept limitations that are too small for us. Right? So one of those is when we get to a certain age, um, like, and sometimes for people that's 25, for other times maybe it's closer to my age, like I'm knocking on the door at 50. And we think things like, I used to be able to touch my toes, or I used to, I remember as a kid being able to sit down and do a healthy natural squat, but my body's changed. Now these healthy organic movements are lost forever. And I thought that that was true for a long time. And I taught that to yoga clients that, like, look, your body may not move in the same way as it did before. It probably never will again, and that's okay. Right? And I think that's true less often than we think, but often what we've been trying is we haven't been applying a really skillful methodology. And with the right methodology, I think it can make a really, really big difference in our mobility. So what Lucas Rockwood, the founder of this training methodology, says is that that basic range of motion. So the range of motion that we had, like most of us are not going to be contortionists and acrobats and gymnasts, and that's good. We don't need to be. We don't need to be healthy. But that basic range of motion, such as we had when we were children, that is going to be accessible to us, and it's never too late for us to get started to restore that. Just start to lift yourself back up. And I've become a believer in that from using this training methodology, particularly with my hips. All right, so maybe hands under your knees. Start to put a bend in your knees. Draw your knees in together. I'm going to turn off to the side just for demonstration purposes. So our reset pose here is going to be a reverse tabletop. So bring your hands under your shoulders, fingers pointing towards your feet. Put a generous bend in your knees. Place the soles of your feet on the mat. And then on an inhale, start to lift your seat up toward the stars. Now, if it's comfortable for your neck, this is often taught dropping the crown of your head back behind you. That doesn't feel great for my neck. So I'm going to leave my chin more tucked in toward my chest. Now, if you notice, this is called a reverse tabletop. In my body, it looks more like the capital level letter M. That's okay. It does the same thing for us, whether it looks like a tabletop or an M. Lower your seat down to the earth. We're going to do this 2 more times. So I asked the founder of this system, Lucas Rockwood, about that. Inhale, lift your hips up toward the stars. Maybe drop the crown of your head back behind you. And so I said just that. Hey, Lucas, I've noticed in this reverse tabletop shape, my body doesn't make a tabletop shape. It makes, like I told you, the letter M. And I think my core is strong enough. I think my upper body is strong enough. I'm not sure what's happening. And what Lucas said is your core and your upper body are definitely strong enough. It's shoulder mobility, right? So thankfully, that's something that we can work on. And if it was a capital letter M for the rest of my life, would also be fine. Lower your seat down to the earth. One full and complete round of breath here. And then we're going to do this 1 more time. Press into your feet, press into your hands, lift your thighs, lift your hips. Continue to breathe. We're breathing the whole time. And then lower your seat down to the earth. Good work, friend. All right, so let's find another seated position. So once again, that's going to look like a bolster under my seat. I'd like you to have whatever you're using for support for your forehead, so blocks or whatever else close by. Lengthen your left leg long in front of you, and then place your right heel in toward the groin. So as close to the groin as you comfortably can. Hands down by your hips, rotate your torso so it's kind of stationed over that left thigh, and then start to walk your hands forward. So again here, support for the forehead might look like blocks under your forehead. That's fine. Your forehead might come down and touch your thigh or your knees. That's also fine. So this training methodology, the science of stretching, it's not like a sweaty power vinyasa practice where we are breathless. We can hardly keep up. We leave this huge pool of sweat on our mat. It's not that kind of practice. And it's really challenging. So I think there are two things about this. One, the high levels of sensation. We are asked to sit within the pain threshold and then try to use the breath to manage that and make that livable. That's challenging. But the second thing is, with some of the quieter practices like science of stretching and yin yoga, I think you signed up for yin tomorrow. We do these long, deep, static holds. So I feel like in my vinyasa practice, when we're flowing through a sequence of poses really quickly, if I have difficult thoughts and emotions come up and I don't want to deal with them, I don't really have to, right? I can move faster and I can lose all of that in the movement. But in these long, deep passive holds, when thoughts and emotions come up, there's no place to run. We have to look at them, right? I think that's really, really healthy. So that's not a diss on vinyasa, power yoga. I love that too. And I need both in my life. But I think these more contemplative practices really help us to grow and develop our mental and emotional capacity and strength. Right. If you've noticed you've created some space, if you've got support under your forehead, you might choose to lower your support a little bit lower, maybe come deeper into the stretch. And we have two more rounds of 4-8 breaths. So we can do that together. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good job. With lots of care, lift yourself up out of the shape. Slide the sole of your right foot onto the mat. So the heel is still in close to the groin. Right knee is pointing up toward the stars. Bring your left hand back behind your left shoulder. Start pressing into your left hand and your right foot. Drop your right arm back behind you. This is just a reset. We're just going to do a wild thing here. And lower your seat down to the earth. Lengthen your right leg long. Draw your left heel in towards your groin. Bring your hands by your hips. Rotate your torso so it's directly in line with that right thigh. And then walk your hands forward. Maybe with blocks under your forehead, maybe not, or some other problem. So the other thing that's interesting to me that I've learned a lot about in terms of developing greater flexibility is in nutrition.
And I never really thought about this, to be honest, but I think we could make the argument, like, if people talk about nutrition for strength training a lot, right? So if you go to a gym, and people are lifting heavy weights, often they're going to be eating um, like pounds and pounds of chicken breast a day, and boiled eggs, and probably whey protein shakes and things like that, right? So that's really pretty common knowledge, and people talk about a lot, that if you're trying to build muscle and strength, then adding some good, healthy, lean proteins into your diet is a good way to do that, right? And the same thing for cardio. If we think about nutrition for cardio, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that carb loading for endurance events is a really common practice. So for marathon runners and such, eating a big plate of pasta the night before they have some kind of a big athletic event is a really common practice. But very, very rarely do we hear people talk about nutrition for mobility and flexibility. So I'll talk about that when we get into our next shape. So for now, 2 more rounds of 4-8 breath. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good job. Lift yourself up out of this shape. Lift your left knee up so the sole of your left foot is on the mat. Generous bend in your left knee pointing up toward the stars. Bring your right hand under your right shoulder, fingers pointing back behind you, and then start pressing into your left foot, your right hand, drop your left arm back behind you, wild thing. And then lower down to the mat. So this next pose is the one that I told you about that's not good for everybody, right? So I'm going to show you a bunch of modifications, but let's set it up for anyone. So I would place a chair right here. If you have a couch cushion or a bolster, you might place it on the chair, but you might want it here too. So let me show you. This is going to be a plow pose in variations. So use good body mechanics. Come down onto your back. Put a generous bend in the knees. Place the soles of your feet on the earth. And then press down into your feet. Lift your thighs, lift your hips. Place some kind of a support, a block or a cushion under your lower back. And then lift your feet, float your feet over your hips. This is the modification. This is waterfall. And frankly, friend, this is what I'm going to choose today. I'm probably going to do it with 2 blocks under my lower back. The other option for a plow pose, shoot the hips up, walk the hands up the back, squeeze the elbows together, and then release your legs overhead, maybe coming to rest onto the bolster and chair, or maybe coming all the way down to the earth. Now I have herniated discs in my back. That shape is no good for me. So I'm going to maintain waterfall on 2 blocks, but you can do either one, whatever best serves your body, your needs, and your interests. That's what I would like for you to do. So nutrition for flexibility training is really about hydration. So one piece is drinking sufficient water, and especially high quality water. By high quality, I mean primarily structured water. But also having moisture dense foods, a lot of moisture dense foods in the diet. So that might be soups, that could be fruits. I think about things like watermelon, papaya, any kind of melon really. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is avoiding foods that are inherently dehydrating. So I do mean salt, but really specifically, I'm talking about things that not just don't bring additional moisture into your system, hydration into your system, but they rob your body of hydration. So think about breads,
crackers, potato chips, anything like that is going to take away from it. No, it's not that we should never have these things in a diet, period, but like it's what are we optimizing for? And not everybody is going to want to optimize the nutrition for flexibility. That's not going to be the priority for everyone. But for people who care about that, that's one area that we might want to give some consideration. In my advanced yoga teacher training through Samana Yoga and Wellness, one of the things that attracted me to their program is they have this anatomy methodology that's called pranic joints. And it basically, if you take like in my business, I've branded my functional yoga classes as stability meets mobility. If you take some of those classes, you'll notice we use those a lot. So it's cycling, it's adding these small, gentle twisting movements into poses for lots of different areas. So it helps loosen connective tissues. It helps warm muscles up. And then eventually, after we've used cycling, then we could do some strength exercises to load the appropriate myofascial line and eventually make that part of the body stronger. So I had moved, I went from like February or March of 2020, where I'd lay on the floor in order to get dressed for work in the morning, to being really pain free. So I thought I'd healed these discs in my lower back. Right. So the good news, what I learned in this lesson last week was that what I've been doing for the last year and a half is really working for me, and I need to keep it up. But I also learned that I haven't healed anything, and the way that I did that is I did this plow pose when I taught this sequence last week, and then my legs and hips hurt for the next 2 days. I had nerve pain the second night after that kept me from sleeping. It's like this is my sign from the universe to stay the course and go back to what I was doing. All right, so we're going to start to come out of this. So if you're in the plow pose, keep your hands on your back, start to lower your seat. Now, if you were in plow pose and you have blocks or some kind of support under your lower back, be mindful of those. But even a waterfall, start to put more of a bend in your knees, lower your feet down to the earth, and then lift up, remove whatever supports under your lower back. And I'm going to have you move on to a seat. Now, some people can do this with good body mechanics, bringing the knees to the chin and rocking from head to heel. That's fine if you can do it with good body mechanics. If not, just roll over onto a side and lift yourself up. And we're going to do a seated forward fold. So once again, to keep my pelvis tipping forward, I'm going to place a bolster as support under my seat. Lengthen the legs long. Initially, you might fold the toes back towards your face. I'm going to come back to block head. So block in between my legs and then walk the hands forward and fold forward. So this seated forward fold in Sanskrit, like in Vinyasa Yoga, we would call Paschimottanasana. Remembering we're looking for a level of 7. So there's no good reason from my perspective to take this beyond a 7 right now. Come back to that 4-8 breath. I had mentioned at the beginning of this pose to find dorsiflexion of the feet, that is to flex the toes back towards your face. But at this point, wet noodle again with the legs.
So you can let the toes relax. You can let the ankles roll out to the inside or to the outside. And I just caught myself with my hands on my ankles, gripping, pulling my heart further down. That's not wet noodle either. So if that's you, like I find I'm pretty type A. And so anytime my palms are facing down toward the earth, whether it's on my legs or it's on the ground, my tendency is to grip and to claw my way forward. So to counter that, the only thing I really need to do for myself is to flip my palms up toward the stars. And that's just a reminder to me to relax, to stop gripping. And I don't have to fight so hard all the time. So in traditional Chinese medicine, the back line of the body, basically from the backs of the heels up along the back, over the back of the head to the crown of the head, is all the domain of urinary bladder meridian, which is water element. And I'll talk more about this in our yin practice tomorrow morning. But the acquired emotion that's most frequently associated with water element, especially kidney meridian, but I think we can associate it with urinary bladder as well as fear. So I happen to think if we're tighter in those areas, sometimes it's fear related, or sometimes I feel like we are more prone to taking on the irrational kinds of fears. So not like the saber-toothed tiger is attacking me fear. That's a good one. We want a sympathetic nervous system response there. But more the I said something dumb to my friend and I'm worried about what she's thinking about me fear. Though we want a conscience and we want to make sure that we're living and behaving in line with our values, like overthinking on stuff like that is super unhealthy. Right. But I also think we can reverse engineer it. And if we can release some of the tension, tightness, and muscular engagement in those areas, it makes it easier for us to release some of the acquired emotions, in this case, fear. Right, 2 more rounds of 4-8 breath. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Start to walk your hands back up your legs. Stack the joints again. Float your head over your shoulders, over your hips. And then however you want to get there, make your way onto your knees. Tap your knees maybe an inch or two apart. You could place support under your seat as you sit back. Or if you've got space, you can let your seat drop down toward the earth. But interlace your hands behind your back. If you can, press the heels of your hands together. Press your knuckles down toward the earth. Lift your gaze. Again, nothing aggressive with the neck. Find a 30-year neck. I'm less interested now for myself and for other people in what we can do with our neck or what we can do with our body for the next year or 5 years even. But find a shape for your neck that you could imagine doing in your practice even 30 years from now. Find your 30-year neck. All right, release your chin to your chest. You can lift your knuckles up, release your hands, grab your strap of your belt, make your way onto your back. And the final pose, now it's a fairly long pose, and it's 3-part per side, but it's called flamenco. So use good body mechanics as you come onto your back and take the one end of the closed loop, hook it around the ball of your right foot, lengthen your left leg long, and then you adjust your belt or your strap to the point I'd like your right leg to be straight.
and I'd like your right arm to be straight. So if the right arm is bent, then we're using muscular engagement to hold on here. It's not sustainable. But straight arms are strong arms. And you'll notice in order for me to maintain this right leg, my heel is well down below my waist. I am not flexing and bending the hamstrings or lower back at all. And then find wet noodle. Come back to your 4-8 breath. And remember, we're looking for that level of 7. So if you're not quite at the 7, you might want to tighten the belt up a little bit. But if you're at an 8 or a 9, you might loosen the belt. Find that straight leg and straight arm configuration. So this flamenco pose in gravity yoga is a 3-part series. So it's 3 parts per side. To your left arm out to the side. We're about to move into the second part. Like gravity, draw the pinky edge blade of your right foot down toward the earth. Now, if you feel your left hip start to lift up off the earth, that's probably far enough down. But this is one that I noticed with a little bit of restraint. Very quickly, I noticed a lot of stretching in the hip AD adductors, the muscles that help draw the legs into center line. So again, I don't have a super flexy and bendy body, but even here in a fairly short amount of time, pinky edge blade of my right foot comes almost all the way down to the earth with my left hip point still resting on the mat. So it doesn't have to be that way, and it can be. Two more rounds of 4-8 breath. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good job. Use the strap. Draw the sole of your right foot more or less parallel to the ceiling. Transfer the strap to your left hand, to your right arm out to the side, and then start to draw your right heel across the center line of your body. So we're not looking for a supine twist, but I would like to really stretch out your hip AB abductors and maybe place a little bit of stress on the IT band as well. So we want to stretch muscles. We want to stretch fascia, or fascia, tomato, tomato. Sometimes you'll hear teachers talk about stressing joints, ligaments, and tendons. So I think what they mean is stress. Apply some constructive stress. But if you find yourself practicing with a teacher that wants to stretch your tendons, ligaments, and joints, I would probably skip that practice. That's one-way traffic. So
stretched tendons in several areas of my body. And once they're stretched, is like I've not found a way to regain that original tension that those connective tissues had for me. So the best that I've found is to be able to stabilize and strengthen the surrounding muscles. So be really careful with that. Or draw the sole of your right foot back parallel to the ceiling. Start to put a bend in your right knee so that you can reach the ball of your left foot up, hook it into your strap, release the sole of your right foot down to the earth, and then find, well, first of all, find equal pressure on both the pinky edge blade and the big toe edge blade of your foot. Straight left leg, straight left arm. Again, straight arms or strong arms. Two more rounds of 4-8 breath. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great job. Start to drop the pinky edge blade of your left foot off the left-hand edge of your mat. When you, once again, just like the other side, when you notice your right hip point start to lift up, that's probably far enough. So I didn't do this intentionally, but it just so happened that there's a block that was off the left-hand side of my mat, and my left calf is more or less supported by that block right now. What I'm finding is that's really nice. It's just a good reminder to make these props work for you, and with a little bit of creativity, there's lots of ways that we can apply these. So later today and tomorrow, I'm going to be working on the recorded version of my Rock the Block workshop, where I think I talk about 3 broad categories for using the yoga block that I think could be really illuminating for people that are either new to block use, or maybe have underutilized blocks a bit. With yoga blocks, especially like in a vinyasa form of yoga, what people think about blocks, what I hear from people a lot anyway, is the blocks make poses easier, and the blocks bring the floor closer to my hands. Both of those things are true, and neither of those things are really a holistic or complete way of looking at the way that blocks can help to elevate our practice. We can use them to add isometric action. We can use those to manipulate and manage the sensation. We can also use them to create favorable angles. Start to sweep the sole of your left foot up toward the ceiling. Transfer the strap from your left hand to your right hand, to your left arm out to the side, and start to draw that left heel across the center line of your body. Again, not looking for a supine twist, but looking to apply some constructive stress on the IT band and to stretch out some of the hip AB abductor muscles.
One more round of breath. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good job. Draw the sole of your left foot back parallel to the ceiling. Put a bend in your left knee sufficient that you can drop the strap, and then set up for any final resting shape. This can be laying on your back. It could be supported by your props. So sometimes a bolster or a pillow or a couch cushion under the knees can be really yummy. But with this chair here, sometimes a resting shape with your calves and your shins supported up on the chair can be really good. But it can be any shape on your seat, your belly, your side, or your back. Just come back to a comfortable, natural breath. If it was evening, I would say go ahead and maintain that 4-8 breath, but that may not be helpful to the rest of your day today. Swallow 2 or 3 times for vagal toning. And then start to draw some deeper breaths. So go bigger in your belly and your chest as you inhale, and then more full and complete on each exhale. And if your body's calling for movement, you could begin to reanimate your body with small movements. That might look like wiggling your fingers or your toes. It might look like something with your neck, maybe gently drawing your chin from shoulder to shoulder. And if those small movements feel good, you could go big at any time. Start to rotate your hands at the wrists, your feet at the ankles. You could draw your knees into your chest, give yourself a full body squeeze. If there's a bend in the knees with the soles of your feet on the earth, you might windshield wiper your legs, dropping your knees from side to side, or take a full body stretch. And then roll over onto either side, find a fetal position. And I'd like you to stay here for 3 or 4 breaths. And two things I'd like you to check in with. First, check in, notice what's the quality of your physical body right now? How's your body feel? And the second thing I'd like you to check in on is what's the quality of your nervous system now, especially relative to starting. And then press yourself up into any seated position. You can have any soft eyes, so they can be open with a soft gaze, or they can be gently closed. And if it feels safe and comfortable for you, place your right hand on your heart your left hand on your belly, and you can repeat to yourself either silently or out loud, may this practice strengthen and heal my body, my mind, and my spirit. May this practice strengthen and heal my body, my mind, and my spirit. And that concludes our practice for today. Amazing work, friend. Friends, again, I'm Chris. I'm from Transformation Nation Yoga and Wellness. And this was our Science of Stretching Hamstring Freedom sequence. You're doing an amazing job. Keep going.